everyone. I'm Angelo Volpe with CVSN, and welcome to another webinar. If you did not receive the detailed program workbook action guide in the webinar invitation, we will post the workbook link in the chat room, or if you want to email Jeff at jvolpe@cvsn.org, he will send it to you to download. Don't forget to type your questions in the chat room and or Q&A sections during this session, and we will pause for questions at the halfway mark and at the end of Jim's presentation. As the country awakens from the COVID-19 crisis, no one knows for sure what the economic new normal will look like. How are you preparing to retain customers, and what steps are you taking to gain new market share? These next few months are going to be crucial to regaining and building customer loyalty. Whatever position you are in, lower, a frontline employee, owner, department manager, the experience you deliver to your customers would directly impact your bottom line and future success. And right now, we are all going to need every single customer we can get. Today, we welcome back Jim Pancero for the third in his series of webinars. The webinar title today is Ready to Become a Stronger Coach and Leader of Your Sales Team. Please help me welcome Jim Pancero.
Good morning, everybody. Excited that you're here. This is, as Angelo said, the third presentation in a series that we've done. The first one really started with the issue with what do you do about the virus as the leader of the team? Then the next one we did was 6 ideas that can help make you and your team more sales focused and more persuasive. On this one, we want to talk now about you as a sales leader of your team. And what can you do as the head of sales, leading a sales team, whether you're the owner or whether you're a sales manager, of what can you do to be more effective in leading your people in these challenging times? The reality is this is such a unique situation all of us are going through that I can promise you that your salespeople really don't know what to do next, and they're not sure what's going to happen or where it's going. I don't know that any of us are. But I think the critical thing with this is, what do you do as a leader? In the middle of a battle, the general doesn't turn to the soldiers and say, so what do you think we ought to do next? The soldiers look for them, the leadership, for direction. I see the same things going on now. We have some slides, and let me share my screen here, and we will get these up. And as Angelo said, there's going to be 3 parts to this that would like your help. The first is about halfway through, I'm going to open it up for questions, so that in the meantime, if you can type in and under the question, the Q&A box, type in any of the questions as they come up. Would love to answer them. Then at the end of the presentation, we're going to have some time as well. Also, in the middle of the presentation, I want to ask your help to build a list. We're going to talk about what kind of salespeople do you need to hire as you rebuild your sales force or as you add people, and would like your participation to show you some awareness of where that list is. And the final point is that if you have questions about this and we do not answer them, you type in a question, doesn't get answered, or you have additional questions, if you call me or email me, I will answer your questions. No charge, no commercial. I'm supporting CVSN and they're supporting me. So if I can help answer any of your questions, please know that's a resource. So as I look through it, also, I know Angelo and Jeff have given you a couple different options of how to find the workbook for the program. I give you another option, and they're all equal, the same workbook at all the places. But if you go to pancero.com/CVSN, you'll see this workbook, as well as I believe the other workbooks from the other 2 presentations are all there. You don't sign up, there's no registration, it's just a page to download the stuff from. So it's a resource. The reality, I think, now of what's most important to me is how dramatic the changes are that have happened because of this coronavirus, and now because of all the other social issues that are going on in our country. And first of all, I hope everybody is safe. I hope your businesses are safe. And I also thank you. You guys have been an essential business. And I know that so many of your members have been working so hard to keep trucks moving and to keep businesses in place through all this. So if anything, I want to say thank you, because I know it's taken a lot of work. The reality, though, is things are changing, and we're pretty clear that it's not going to go back to the old ways for a long time. So now the question is, what do you do as leading your team to gain a competitive advantage in these more challenging times, to figure out how you can do a better job supporting your customers and even building new customers because of the philosophies and approaches that you've had. That's really been a common theme of the first two videos as well as this one as well. But within this, so what do we do about it? This program, we're talking really specifically about you as a manager. How do you protect and lead your team when there's so many volatiles and so many unknowns that are happening and things changing so fast? I want to talk about three things with this. The first I want to talk about is how do you become a stronger selling process coach and leader to your team? The second thing we're going to talk about then is how do you get into the coaching zone? Where are you most effective as a coach? What language and terms and focus can you have that can make you a stronger leader of your team? And then finally, we're going to talk about, so what are some actions and things you can do moving forward about this? If we look at this, how do you become a stronger coach and leader of your sales team? Now, one of the things I'm going to ask permission of you, I guess we're going to take just kind of, or take advantage of you, is I have 5 slides in this presentation that I have shown to you earlier in our either the first presentation on how do you lead in a virus impacted world. There's about 4 slides from that I briefly just want to remind you of because it ties this information together. And then 1 slide from the 6 skills that we covered just recently. But we're going to move through them quickly, but want to identify there is some redundancy because I felt it tied into the concepts and the structure that we're trying to develop here. One of the things I think is important to identify is there's some foundations that have not changed through this whole process. If we go back a year ago, there are 3 keys to you having a competitive advantage that I was talking about. I've been talking about it for decades, frankly, that I don't believe have changed even in everything being upside down. What does it take for you to gain a competitive advantage as a company? There's really 3 things. The first thing is we need to have a stronger support to your message of uniqueness. What's your value statement? Somebody says, why do I want to buy from you? Or why do I want to keep buying from you? What are you going to say? I find this is a weakness in most companies, even before the virus impacted. And now when there's new messaging being required, most companies are at a loss for what their message even should be. The second thing is that there's more controls and tools. Selling is becoming paint by numbers. What we're seeing with this electronic environment where it used to be you send a sales rep out to a customer, they could spend a half hour, bring some donuts, talk to everybody, chit chat, be their friends, bring up a couple new ideas, and have a very relaxing sales call that might take a half hour, an hour. Today, when we're now remote selling so much of our time, we don't have that half hour like we used to. So basically the selling process we're dealing with has compacted. It's shortened. It's like we've applied the philosophies of quality controls of Kaizen. We're trying to eliminate steps and shorten the path something has to cover. So because of that, if we tighten up and shorten the amount of time a salesperson has to sell at any time, that also means that we have to become more structured and consistent to be able to be more effective in that shorter period of time. So the tools and structures of selling are becoming even more important as we shorten the selling cycles of how long do we have on a sales call to be persuasive. Looking at my business, amazing the difference. It used to be I would do seminars that were usually half day to a full day of time to work through, answer questions, have a lot of interaction. Now look how the learning process has shifted, at least for the time being, to being 1 hour or less webinars that are really more one-way conversations. So we have to put structure to any messages we deliver in this new environment if we're going to be able to maintain our persuasiveness. And the final thing is it's all management led. Boy, in the old days, pre-virus, baby boomer philosophies, you actually bragged that you had salespeople that you didn't have to support. They just left the office and stayed out of your way unless they had a problem or needed special help with pricing or expediting. But today, it's much more of a hands-on environment, especially with as volatile and as high change as it is, so that your strength as a manager is becoming even more effective within this. Now, a couple slides that we're repeating, and so the third thing is maintaining more of a process control. These are some slides we repeated, but I think it's a foundation I want to share. And that is, what is your job as a sales manager? Whether it's as an owner managing salespeople, or whether you're a head of sales as a VP of sales position, or whether you're a frontline sales manager that has a few salespeople reporting to you. You might even be carrying some territory yourself. But if we look at it, I have a real simple definition. I believe the job of a sales manager is to help your people achieve more than they would have achieved if you just left them alone. You're the delta change to that person. So this old model of how we just leave people alone and they call us when they need us really wasn't even fulfilling this foundational definition of what a sales manager is. Our job is to help that improve what they're doing over what they would have done on their own. And we also covered in one of the earlier presentations, how do we do that? Well, it's a foundation of all this process that there's 4 rules of motivation. I learned this from a mentor of mine back in the 1970s. And I think it's still true today. The first rule of motivation is you can't motivate anybody to do anything. Motivational speakers only tend to motivate themselves because they get paid. We cannot motivate anybody to do anything. And the reason is because everybody's already highly motivated. If you're alive, you're motivated. Remember Zig Ziglar used to say, I can show you a bunch of unmotivated people. It's called a cemetery. The problem we have, though, is, everybody's highly motivated. Where the problems occur is people are motivated for their reasons, their bias, their background, their experiences, their culture, their beliefs, not ours. So we can't motivate to say, this is what I demand you do. What we have to do, and frankly, the 4th point that's critical to all of this, is we have to create an environment so that people will motivate themselves. So if we look at your job as a manager, it really comes down to what kind of environments have you created, especially when you still have people working out of their homes so much, dealing with customers that are working in more remote locations. How do we create an environment for that person, especially if they're having to work alone and don't have the office environment to motivate them anymore? How do we help make sure that they have an environment that they're motivated, being able to do the job we need them to do? So how do we do that? Well, the problem with most managers, and this is another repeat slide from the virus one, we have only 2 more and that's it. One of the challenges we have is then where are the managers spending their time? This has always been a dichotomy I've watched with sales leadership over the last, at least 10 years, as I worked with companies and worked with distributors like your CVSN members. And the reality is that even though we talk about the job of a sales manager is to help each of our people achieve more than they would have achieved if left alone, and our job is to create an environment for people to motivate themselves. When we look then, it's okay, now where have you as a manager been spending your time? We have a list here. For the vast majority of sales leaders, the list is all reactive. They're spending all their time on paperwork, administrative things, tracking numbers, acting as a sales rep themselves, solving problems, fighting fires, expediting. All these other issues are happening. So if we look at the actual time in a week or a month that they spend with their sales reps, there's so little spent on the more proactive things of coaching and training and leading your sales reps through account planning or giving them direction. So one of the things I'd ask you to do, we asked it in one of the earlier presentations, so apologize for the redundancy, is to take an evaluation and say, so where are you spending your time? Because we're not going to be able to help people achieve more than they would have achieved if we just left them alone and build a stronger environment for them to motivate themselves, if all we're doing is spending time on expediting inventory, problem solving, and tracking the financial numbers and beating our people up because they're not selling anything right now. That's the bottom line I watch of management today. So how do we change that? Well, there's something that's been going on, and this is the final slide that is a repeat from and this was from the 6 things to improve your selling skills. But I thought it was such a powerful thing to set up how you as a manager are more effective. And that is to look at what your process is. What do you do and how do you sell an account from the time you identify a new opportunity, whether it's with an existing customer or with a new prospect? What do you do from the time you identify a new opportunity till the time you close on the sale? What's the process you go through? Now, what was amazing was in the baby boomer times, pre-virus, most companies didn't have that defined because the baby boomer philosophy of selling is everything's one-off. You ask a sales rep, what's the steps of this process? In fact, if you want to do a simple test, draw this visual out just as it exists now, just with the ID to close markers on it, because we're going to add additional things in a moment to this visual. But if you just drew the visual that you have now to your sales team, one-on-one, and said, okay, you've been selling for us for 5 years. What's your process? What do you do on the 2nd call versus the 5th call versus the 8th call to make the sale? What do you do from the time you identify a new opportunity till the time you close on the sale? I've asked hundreds of salespeople these questions. And the problem is, the most consistent answer I hear is, it depends. Because everything is one-off. They would just create it. They go into a customer and say, what do you need? What keeps you awake at night? What could we most do to be the best vendor for you and to help you? The customer says something and the sales rep goes, oh, that's exactly what we do. And now the whole message of your company is redefined just as a suck-up response for the sales rep to be able to try to win the business. Now the problem though is even your internal people don't even know how to support your customers because they find each customer is buying for a completely different reason. This has been a challenge of this lack of consistency and lack of predictability and lack of controls because it's very difficult to coach to this process if the process has never been defined. And every time the sales rep starts a new process, they think they have to reinvent the process completely. Look how scattered that makes all sales coaching and leadership that you can do and accomplish. And what we talked about in the six skills you can improve was in the middle of this, there's a profound activity that occurs. And that profound activity is when the sales rep gives their price quote. The reason this is so significant is because before the sales rep gives a price quote, they actually have a lot of power in selling. But as soon as they give their quote to the customer, this is what it's going to cost. Here's my bid. Here's my proposal. Here's my RFP or RFQ, whichever you use. Sales rep loses all their power. Before I give you a proposal, if we were looking at doing sales training and we were talking and I said to you, boy, would you let me talk to a couple of your sales reps just to see where they are so I can give you a better proposal? I bet you'd say yes. But if I gave you my proposal yesterday and said, by the way, sure like to still talk to some of your people and you're still evaluating my proposal with 2 or 3 others, I doubt you'd let me do that. Your answer, I bet, would be, if you win the business, Jim, well, I'm happy to do some additional research. But until then, let's just wait. So the reality is, as soon as the proposal is issued, the sales rep has lost all their power to interact and deal with the customer. What we talked about in the last presentation was, but when are most managers getting involved in this process to help their team? And this is a fundamental challenge of management, is in the old model, managers were getting in too late because the sales rep only brought the sales manager in after they've given the proposal to try to help close it. In a lot of companies, you don't even know what's been bid until you see it pop up on your proposal tracking system, because the sales rep didn't tell you it was in play until they had to issue a proposal. So now when the manager gets involved, the only things they can really do is to cut the price to try to help win the business. Or the second option they have is to throw in some additional resources or free stuff, which cuts the margins to try to win the business. That's all that's left, because they can't ask any more questions. There's not much more research they can do at this point that will help the customer. So the whole idea that we've talked about with sales leadership is, how do we go from this older transactional model, which we're going to talk about in more depth in a minute, how do we shift this to more of a selling process where the manager gets involved early? So not to do the job for the sales rep and not to sell the account. The manager might not even be on site to the customer or face-to-face with the customer during the selling process, coaching earlier part of the process, but it's meant to be a coaching guide to help guide the sales rep through this process. By the way, this change has happened at the NFL. It used to be in the NFL, if you watch, the quarterbacks used to call the plays from the field. They had those plastic sleeves on their arms that would show all the plays to remind them of the codes and the plays they were going to consider running. You don't see those today because, well, if anybody that's into football knows that the plays are now being called by the offensive coordinator is up in the stand talking on a microphone to a speaker in the helmet of the quarterback. Not because quarterbacks are dumber, even though I'm from Dallas, I'll wait and give you all a shot, but it's not because of that. It's because the game has gotten more complex. So where's your philosophy as a sales leader? Are you there in a reactive position saying, call me if you need me, and when a proposal's in trouble, I'll try to help sell it and close it, which would be the transactional? Or are you more of a selling process getting involved earlier? And what I see is the major difference with this is really defining management philosophies pre and post virus. If we consider the last 90 days kind of the tipping point of everything before the last 90 days was pre-virus of what was going on when things were considered normal. And if we look at everything moving forward as post-virus, what are the major changes that have happened or need to happen? This visual to me is one of the most significant. We need to shift from that more reactive transactional manager that we come in and try to help save the day and close the business, to being more of a coaching guide by getting involved earlier to help our sales reps, because we're dealing in such shorter cycles of selling. We don't have as much time in front of the customer. We don't have as many at-bats to talk to them about how we can help. So we've got to make sure that our message is stronger, tighter, and more effective with competitive differentiation if we're going to have any chance of making a sale. So now how do we do that? How do you become more of a selling process coach and leader as a manager? That's what that's what we're talking about today. See, one of the ways to look at it, the first thing to deal with how we deal, where do you deal with your people on information? See, there's 3 levels of information: history, today, and future focused. History is when dealing with all the stuff that's happened in the past. If you're spending a lot of time reviewing call reports to find out where your people were and what they did, expense reports, what happened, meetings. Great example is for me of this of these 3 levels of information is a sales rep comes into you and says to their manager to say, boy, the Johnson account's really upset. What's your first question as a manager? I bet it's going to be a history focused question. You're likely to say, so what happened? Or if I've worked for you a while, what'd you do this time? Some kind of history question. Well, they gave me an order. I threw it in my truck. It fell in between the front seat of my car. I didn't realize that I'd lost it. And that was 2 weeks ago. The customers expect this to come any day. I just ordered it yesterday. It's going to be another 2 weeks. What's your next question? I bet it's going to be a today focused question. The next one, today focused question is going to say, so what are you going to do to fix it? What's it going to take to get this straightened out? How are you going to solve this problem? What actions are you going to take? A very today focused question. Now, the problem I watch in management is most managers have fallen into this trap of these are the only 2 levels of questions they ask. So if I, as a sales rep, bring you a problem and say, boy, the Phillips account's upset, the first question you ask is what's happened? And the second is, what are you going to do about it? Or what do you think is going to fix it? And they give you instructions of how to fix it. Problem is, look how repetitive problems become when we treat them that way. The 3rd level that needs to be part of this is the future focus. So instead of just asking what happened and what's going to fix it, the 3rd question is, how are we going to make sure this doesn't happen again? How are you going to clean out your car to make sure that you have better tracking of your orders? How are we going to give you some better information controls? But look at how the future focus side of any kind of problem solving means of how we eliminate or reduce that problem in the future by proactively fixing things. History in today tends to be reactive. What happened and how do we respond? But proactive says, now that we've learned that we've had some problems, what do we do about it? My concern is most managers don't spend that much time in future focus. Their whole conversation is what's the problem and go ahead and fix it by doing this. Now, we can build a structure to talk about this idea of the differences of sales leadership. I know it looks rather complex, but it's very straightforward, I promise you. And the whole idea is that we're going to build a 4-square pattern. On the vertical axis, we have on the top to bottom, we have on the top of the page, are you a more proactive leader, an initiator? Where on the bottom, we have more reactive support, which would make you as a manager more of a responder or a supporter. So do you spend more time proactively initiating your leadership efforts and conversations with your team? Or do you have more of a reactive support? Reactive support is to tell the sales reps, even customers, my door is always open. Call me when you need me. I'm available anytime you're in a jam. That's reactive. Proactive leadership says, get in here and tell me what you're doing about the Phillips account. So are you more proactive or reactive as a manager within that axis? The second, on the horizontal side, we're going to build a second axis now, and that's to what we just talked about. On the left, we have history and today, and on the right, we have more future focused. So a history and today focused manager would just be asking what happened and what are you going to do to fix it? Firefighting, problem solving, just get the problem off of their desk. Where a future focus says, what do we do to repair or improve so it doesn't happen again the next time? Now, if we take these simple 4 components, top to bottom, proactive to reactive, side to side, history today and today focus versus future focus, we come up with 4 distinct styles of management with actions that they feel are important that they need to initiate as part of their job. Look what happens if somebody's very history and today focused and very reactive. Look how they're going to spend most of their time on special pricing, problem solving, crisis management things. Where if they're much more proactive as a leader and they're future focused, they're going to spend more time on coaching and training and defining and improving best practices. So the question is, you look at these 4 squares, where are you spending most of your time? Where is your universe that you live in as the leader of your sales team? My concern is more people are in the golden area of that, the bottom half of this visual, than they are in the blue upper half. That they're not proactive leaders that are more future focused. Most are history and today focused in a reactive support. Call me when you need me. Now, by the way, we have to be clear. This is not trashing anybody for them doing this, because this is what worked for 20 years with the baby boomers. How many of your baby boomer sales reps used to even ask you, are you going to leave me alone and just let me do my job? So management became a support function because baby boomer sales reps didn't want their help. I mean, the joke is, if a sales call crashes and there's no manager around, did it count? So you watch a lot of sales reps who would even hide some of the new business opportunities they had with their customers until they had to give them a price quote and it had to be entered in the system, just because, let's just not make noise if we don't have to, in case the thing blows up in our face. So we spent 20 years with the managers being in this support position. This is why a lot of managers started carrying territory themselves. Or if they lost a sales rep, they just took over their territory because they had time, because they were only in a reactive or more support position. Sales leadership is changing today to this more proactive and more future focused, actively involved as a coach and leader of your team. So where are you in this transition, and what's your style of management? Now, when we cross these axes, we put this visual together, this comes up with a real simple representation of what the difference is between a transactional manager, which is very history and today focused and very reactive in what they do, to the more selling process coach and leader, which is a more proactive leader who is more future focused. Now, what's exciting is the differences in these two styles are so simple and direct. It really only comes down to 4 words. See, transactional managers spend most of their time asking what and who questions. What are you going to sell this week, and who's it going to be? What do you got coming up for the rest of the month, and who's it going to be? Where selling process managers are asking more how and why questions. They're asking questions about the process, not the results. How are you going to go after that business? Why aren't you also calling on the head of finance? Those kind of more process questions in their thinking and what they're trying to accomplish. So now the question is, what kind of language are you using? Where do you want to spend your time as a manager? Where do you feel you'd be most effective? Now, to me, this goes back to the original definition we talked about of what's the job of a sales manager: to help our people achieve more than they would have achieved if just left alone, and building an environment for people to motivate themselves. I see the managers that are most effective now, post-virus, with all these changes and everything upside down for us, are the ones that are more responsive to their people in a more proactive way, asking more how and why questions. Even, how are you doing? How is all this? How are you handling all this? Not just dealing with the transactions of what or who. Angelo, this is a great time to ask if there's any questions.
Well, we have a few here. How do we become more selling process focused when things are changing so fast and nobody seems to know where it's all going to land?
And this is, what's been fascinating is I have been doing webinars now since everything started, probably early March. I think I've done about 25 webinars. And as I looked at the first webinars I did, if we go back to the very first webinar I did for CVSN, it was really on the virus, talking about the impact of what do you do in the middle of a crisis. And look how things have changed now. We're in such a high change environment. Every 2 weeks, I'm having to redo the webinar topics that I had proposed to people, or the content of it, just because things are evolving and changing so fast. So it's a valid concern to have of what do we do about it. But this is the job of a leader. See, the job of a leader is, even if we don't know where things are going, you've got to take it one step further than anybody else to start to be the scout to set the path or the direction of where we're going to go with this. And by the way, sometimes it's going to be the wrong direction. But inaction, I believe, is always less effective than action, even if the action is not going to be perfect for what we need. Frankly, a lot of leadership today is, how do we just suck less over this next week because we don't know what's going on. We don't know how our customers are going to deal with this. Our customers don't want to see us at the moment, or they get upset when we come in. It's interesting how many businesses I'm dealing with right now in my own life that I've told some of the managers saying, I'm not coming back because your people don't respect me, because they won't even wear their masks, or they're not wearing their masks properly. It's this changing environment of how are you protecting me and what value are you bringing? So as part of this is also one of the reasons as a manager, every time you talk to a customer, just ask them another question. We don't have to have you devote a full day to saying, I'm going to be a selling process coach on Fridays, and be realistic. But what can you do that one extra question? That one extra question to make it a more future-focused discussion when somebody brings you a problem. These are the kind of ways we can drive changes for this. But it's a constantly changing environment. The real goal is how can we just stay one step ahead of our salespeople, one step ahead of our customers, and hopefully one step ahead of our competitors. Any other questions?
Well, Jim, this is an interesting one. Experts have said that the businesses whose leaders have emphasized innovation during the pandemic and plan to continue emphasizing it as the new normal settles in will be poised to take market share from competitors. And a critical area where they can innovate is their sales model. What do you think this new sales model will look like in the future?
I think it's a fantastic question. The easiest way, I believe, or the best analogy I have to describe it, and I apologize if we talked about this on the 6 skills or not, but analogy I like to use is we need to change the way we shoot. My sport, I don't play golf. My sport's sporting clays. I don't want to kill anything, but I love shooting plates. And as part of it, I see this difference in shooting. That if we look at pre-virus, what our whole sales philosophy was we as a company used a rifle that we aimed at the customer, we pulled the trigger, and the bullet, single bullet that came out was the sales rep. Now, I apologize, I've not found a better analogy, especially in our upside down, the political challenges our whole country is having right now and the difficulties everybody is going through. So this is kind of a harsh example, but it's that single bullet of that one sales rep. You'd send them out, they'd live with the customer, they go out and ride with the customer's people, they just go out and bring donuts and spend time with them, and they were the voice of the company. In a lot of cases, that sales rep's voice was the only voice that the customer heard or had any kind of interaction with, except maybe some kind of order desk. What's it today? Well, we have taken the effectiveness of that sales rep going out and living with the customer on site has been taken away, at least for the time being, probably for the next several years. So now the question is, how do we still have impact when our main force of impact has been taken away from us? Where the sales rep just can't spend that much relationship time, can't be their buddies on site, and they have the impact like they used to have. So now we need to switch to more of a shotgun approach where each individual BB might not be the effectiveness of what we need, but it's the mass of this that's there. So how is selling changing? I believe one of the ways selling's changing is that you need to have more representation of your company to your customers to show the importance of that customer to your company. See, 2 months ago, if you as a manager would have asked the customer to say, hey, I'd love to talk with you by Zoom and let's have a conversation. There's a good chance the customer would have said, what, are you too cheap to get in the car and drive over and see me? But they don't want to see you today. So now we have this opportunity that they will accept visual, they will accept sales calls by video. They will accept doing these Zoom conversations or GoToMeeting or WebEx or FaceTime or whatever you like to use of the media. So because now it's receptive to do that, how do we make sure we have more than just our sales rep present in front of that customer? And one of the ways to do that is, how do we get you as a manager? How do we get the owner of your company? How do we get the head of your warehouse? How do we get inventory, order entry people, the head of order entry? And at just different times, having them join in on the sales call with the customer. So the sales rep now is presenting the suite of players that are there to support the customer. It's not just the sales rep as the Lone Ranger anymore doing the job. So one of the ways I believe that we're seeing and most significant that I see already that selling is going to be changing is part of competitive advantage is going to be how effective your team is in selling and communicating that customer. Now, you get the owner of your company on a call with a sales rep. The job of that owner on that call is not to close the business. It's not to make a sale. It's not to negotiate price. That's the sales rep's job. What we want to do is the higher up in the company organization that you go, the more tactical and future, we'll talk about that in a minute, but the more future focused that person needs to be. Talking about where would you like to see us be? How can we be of more support to you? What do you see you're getting from your other vendors that really impresses you of how you want to have us do business with you in the future? How do we keep you safe? It's those bigger picture questions are where the real power is, but of getting multiple people in front of the customer to show the customer that the entire team is there to do that. That's the first major thing I think in selling change. The second major change I believe that needs to happen is there needs to be more things done on purpose, planned out, organized. I believe right now, every 2 weeks, you should be giving the sales reps a different message that communicates your uniqueness or your value or the extra efforts you're using to support your customers. And every 2 weeks, they just change the message of what the sales reps have when they talk to customers. So we keep a variety of messaging and values being communicated to the customer directly. We've got to look at this process. The third thing I think is critical of how selling has changed is we've got to listen to the customers and do more surveying, interviewing, not paper surveys, but one-on-one of just what do you want? How can we help you? How much support do you want? I was impressed. I've got one of my customers sent out emails to their customers and just did a quick survey saying, we just want to be responsive to you. How do you want us to support? Do you really want us on site right now? Or would you rather us do this electronically? This whole idea that we have to be, everybody's in a different position. I'm amazed. I got invited to a party a couple days ago and I said, right now, there's no way in hell I want to go to a party. There's no business value to me of being there. It's just social. And why would I expose myself with the potential that if we don't know what's happening with this virus and there might be a second wave? So if I'm a buyer, if I'm the customer, how are you going to respect where I am with that? Whether you need to wear a mask or not. These are becoming personal decisions of your customers. We need to know where they are if we're going to be most persuasive to be able to have any kind of impact to help them. That was kind of a long answer, but any other questions or is it okay to jump back in?
Are you able to take one more quick question?
I think it'd be a great idea.
Okay, Randy Fisher has asked, what are some of the best practices a manager can use to motivate a long-tenured salesperson that is set in his or her ways and happy and comfortable?
I think it's a valid point. I think one of the first things you got to do is talk to these people to say, how much are you going to change? Because it's interesting that we have some of these senior people. I've heard it with some of my customers that the sales reps, their whole attitude is, well, when can I get back and start riding with my customers again? They don't view this as a cultural change that we've gone through in the last 3 months. They just viewed it as a timeout that prevented them from getting with their customers. And their assumption is as soon as everybody says, okay, we can go back to work, kind of like there was a fire drill and we all had to leave the building. As soon as we go back to our desks, we're going to do exactly the same thing we used to do. I don't think your customers are going to allow that. I don't think your customers are going to want that. So what we got to do is start talking two things. One is, this is why I believe managers need to be interviewing and talking to your customers as to what do they want. So you don't have a biased older sales rep that just wants to go out and ride with their customers or just go out and make their calls and bring donuts in the morning and soft drinks and candy in the afternoon or any of that stuff. And they're just waiting to go back to their old ways. We got to be careful to make sure those old ways are appropriate for your customer. They might be, I don't know. So the only way I know what to do is to ask the customer, what would you like? How do you want to see it done? And then this coaching of these more senior sales reps to say, this world is changing. It's not going to go back. How are you adjusting? I think there's a third piece to this as a manager that's critical, and that is you have to define, what do you define as the best practices you want your team following that you believe will help get the job done and generating revenues, will help keep your people safe, but more importantly, will show a respect to the customer of the safety issue. I went to one store because none of the people were wearing a mask. Even the employees, they wore them in half mask, where you could see their nose, and they're dealing with me face to face. And I finally went up to the manager and say, you don't respect me. If you had respect for your customers, you'd have your employees wearing masks. The employees were taking it as a personal affront of, my independence is taken away and it's not fair I have to wear these masks and they're hot and all the other things. They don't see it as a reflection of their customer and how they're respecting their customer in this. This is a time you as a manager have to decide what are the directions you want to go, because you might have to push some of your senior people to go, you have to change or you're not going to make it in this new environment, because your competitive advantage is being redefined right now against your competitors as to who's going to do the best job of being respectful, keeping the customer safe, and still being effective to get the job done. If we have senior people that are just entrenched in place going, I'm not changing anything, I'm just going to go back to the old way I did it, they may actually be hurting your company. You got to decide how they're going to fit. If it's a new world, there's going to be new rules. That's pretty straightforward. Angela, if it's okay, how about if we get back into, and we'll have a chance for great questions. Thank you, everybody. We got 2 more things we want to do that I would like your help with. The first is, in just a moment, there's an exercise I'd love you to give your comments and answers to show you how this fits. I'm talking about how do you find salespeople that are going to be effective for what you need. And then at the end, towards the end of the presentation, we're going to have another chance for questions. And the final point is, if you don't get your questions answered, if you email me, text me, or call me, we will have a conversation and I will answer your questions to help you through this. So let's get into it. So we talked about this selling process versus transactional manager position. How do we get into this coaching zone that we're talking about? Well, one of the things I watch happen is we have to look at what skills our sales reps have and what skills we need to fill or build around them. So this is an exercise I would ask you to do. You have in your Q&A slots, in fact, I'm just going to exit out of this for a moment and go, I'm going to bring up the Q&A slot. If you would answer here's the scenario. You need to hire another sales rep. You need to build out your team. You've lost a position or somebody is left and you need to hire somebody to replace them. So you're going to have to hire a new salesperson. What attributes or what skills are you most interested in this interview to find out, and what, for the candidates you're looking for, what attributes are most important to you? When you go to hire a new salesperson, what skills or attributes are most critical that you want to see them have to be considered and hired by your company? If you would take a moment and just enter into the question and answer phase about where you are, what are some of the terms that are most important to you?
Nobody's really chipping in at all there, Jim. So
that's okay. I can feel the love.
here's some coming in now. Positive attitude, excited, open-minded, self-motivated.
Anybody else? Now, by the way, if you don't have time to answer now or to do this on our call, this is a great exercise if you have other managers in your company to do this exercise in-house with your team, is to write down. Because normally it's the kind of stuff that by the way, these answers are strong that we're seeing, but it's this kind of answers: a positive attitude, excited, open-minded, self-motivated. They have a coachable attitude. They're extroverted. They have some kind of technical knowledge and they understand the product, and they're really willing to learn and to be present with customers. That's a good list, I think, as part of this. And I thank those of you that participated. Let me put the slides back up here. And here, this is the problem, because if we look, there are 4 sales skills that we need to have a salesperson have to be successful. Pretty straightforward stuff. It's like 4 levels of a building. The first floor is the foundation of all selling is having a strong attitude and energy. Hard worker, committed, professionally curious, loves to ask questions, is an extrovert, can handle rejection, all those other attitude and energy. It's 4:30 and they're still working on Friday. That's attitude and energy. If you went through any sales training in the old days, this was the material of Zig Ziglar, and Tony Robbins was really strong in teaching these ideas about how to stay self-motivated, how to have the right attitude, and how to have the proper energy. The second set of skills on top of that, just as important, are your personal skills. These are your operational skills. Your knowledge of the steps of a sales call is an operational skill. Any product or technical or industry knowledge you have about trucking and truck parts is an operational skill. Understanding how to ask questions, how to close, how to qualify, those personal face-to-face selling skills are all part of operational. The third set of skills are tacticals. Tactical skills deal with process, structures, or controls. There's really 3 tactical structures that are important within this concept of the successful skills of selling. The first tactical is what we've talked about already. What is your ID to close process? In fact, I believe in the 6 sales skills, we covered what those steps were in that workbook of a suggested for traditional distribution. The second set of tactical skills, though, is what do you do once you have a customer? What do you do from January 1st to December 31st? Otherwise, sales reps just come in and keep asking the same 4 questions. Anything you need, anything coming up, anything I can help with, how's the family becomes their average sales call. If we put a plan in place by having it defined what we're going to do from January 1st to December 31st, we tend to remove those repetitive messages from the sales calling efforts and have more things to talk about of value and uniqueness that help presents why we are a competitive advantage to continue doing business with them. The third tactical structure that's so critical, especially on your larger customers, is how do you get higher, wider, and deeper? Then the fourth skill is your strategic skills, which deal with philosophy, positioning, and approach. Now, if we look at the answers we collected, even the few that we got, or if we look at the answers others write down, here's the problem in sales leadership. You're not looking high enough for the positions that you're interested in hiring. Because when I ask managers, it's consistent when I do this exercise. What skills or attributes do you most want in the salespeople you're going to hire? Notice that their list only fits every time, only covers the attitude and energy and operational stuff. It's like they're good on their feet. They have a right attitude. They're a hard worker. They know how to make a sales call. Look at that. That becomes minimum requirements, though. What's not there, and what's not usually on the list for managers of what they look for in a people, is how do you have control of your selling process? Do you have a multiple step plan? Do you understand how to differentiate yourself to maintain a customer relationship without being repetitive? Those tactical issues. How do you communicate a stronger philosophy or positioning of uniqueness? Why, based on all the competitive alternatives available to me, do I want to buy from you? These are all strategic questions. But when I ask managers that are going to interview salespeople, what skills are you looking for? They only give me skills for the bottom 2 levels, attitude and energy and operational. And here's the problem. Any salesperson that has strong operational skills and a strong attitude and energy will be competitive as a sales rep. The problem is they just don't have any competitive advantage. I don't know of any competitive advantage that comes from your attitude and energy or your personal selling skills. How many times have you had a neighbor saying, well, I bought a new car yesterday? Why'd you buy a new car? Well, I couldn't help it. Sales rep did a perfect sales call. That's not relevant. Why did you choose that vendor? Because they had control, they had messaging and positioning I liked. It's those more advanced skills. So a competitive advantage comes from what you do tactically and strategically. You just become competitive based on how you personally handle yourself with your attitude and your energy in your personal sales call. But look at this antiquated thinking most managers have, that when they go to look for a salesperson, they're only looking at the persuasive side of it, of the attitude and energy and operational. They're not looking at the control of their territory and leadership of their territory by having more tactical controls of thinking and planning more moves ahead and being more strategic in how they can communicate a stronger philosophy and positioning of uniqueness. So when we look at this, we need more tactical. If we look at what do your sales reps need today? One of the things that was a question earlier is where do we see this going and what skills do our salespeople need? This is a great visual of those skills, because even though our people need help at all the levels, right now with everything being disrupted, we need to work with them on their attitude and energy to keep them positive and keep them going strong. But we also need to make sure they understand the basics of selling. Steps of a sales call are becoming critical today. Because we have such short time frames to be persuasive in, we've got to have some structure and control. But those are minor. The major issues are that we know how to take a customer down a path that we can help solve their problems and bring them value so that we make the sale. And that we have better philosophy and positioning of communicating why us and why we're a better choice than the others within our selling process. Now, so how do we achieve that as a manager? This is where we get into what's called the coaching zone. And what I want to do now is we're going to take the 2 visuals we've talked about in this presentation. On the left-hand side, we have the 4 selling skills we just talked about. On the right-hand side, we have the history today and the future focused that we discussed right before this earlier. Well, the coaching zone, we have to understand, is where we have power and the sales reps don't. Where your sales reps have the most power? Well, they have the most power when you ask them, what are they going to say on a sales call? How are they going to ask questions? How are they going to keep working hard? Attitude and energy and operational skills is where the sales reps are really strong. They're also strong in history. They know what happened at the account, usually better than a manager. So they can defend themselves by talking more history. So the coaching zone for you as a manager is when you can keep the conversation tactical, strategic, and future focused. So I don't want to ask you, how are you going to ask questions on that call to find out what the customer needs? Because there's a good chance, especially with an experienced salesperson, they would feel you're kind of micromanaging them. They're getting in their face. Now, if they're a new salesperson, they want help in any area. But an experienced person would be a little uncomfortable saying, don't tell me how to ask the questions. Let's just talk about what questions are most critical to ask. And so we want to talk about tactical. What's your process? We've joked about this in past programs. I think we covered it on the 6 skills webinar, that most sales reps are like the Halari bird. If you remember, the Halari bird's a 3-foot bird, lives in 4-foot grass. Spends his whole life saying, where the hell are we? Well, what's part of our goal of the coaching zone is we want to help them tactically. So we help them think and plan more moves ahead, since most sales reps only think next best move. What are you going to do? And then what is a great question to ask in coaching, in the coaching zone? You told me what you're going to do. And then what are you going to do after that? What's your next call going to be after that? So if we can stay more future focused and more tactical and strategic, that gives us the power of leading our team and coaching them through the process. Let me show you, there's 4, I want to end our program, and we're still going to have a few moments for questions in a minute, but there are 4 keys to a competitive sales leadership moving forward that I wanted to share with you to kind of summarize everything we've talked about. And that is specifically, what can you do about this stuff to help you be a more effective coach and leader of your team? 4 things I suggest. The first is, we need to have defined selling process tools and processes in place for your people with tracking. These are the 3 that I would encourage you to put attention on. We need to worry about what's our message of uniqueness and value, and it needs to be able to be said within a minute. If you want to have an interesting exercise, ask each of your sales reps in a minute, just to tell you, okay, I'm a new prospect. You got 1 minute. Why, based on all the options available to me, do I want to buy from you? What am I going to get from you I'm not going to get from anybody else? And ask your people to do that. I had some of my customers will do a sales contest where they have each of their sales reps have to record a 1-minute message, and it has to be under a minute, about why do I want to buy from you and your company. And then they forward them to the sales managers, and the sales managers pick the best couple ones they have, and that becomes a standard to show the others. I'll warn you, if you do this exercise, every person you talk to will have a different message. But the second skill we got to work on is the steps of a sales call. And the reason that is so critical is the more we shorten the time a salesperson has on a call, the more critical the salesperson gain control of that call. And the only way you're going to gain control of a sales call, especially under a shorter time frame, is you got to know the structures of the steps of a sales call. We've covered this in that past presentation as well. So you can see what the steps are if you were not part of that call. But the idea is we need to have more control because we have a shorter period of time to be persuasive in. If you only got 5 minutes to be persuasive, you better be organized. If we got an hour to be persuasive over lunch with a customer, you don't have to worry too much about structure. Look how this shortening of time has required us to add more structure if we have any chance of being persuasive and effective. And then the third is how we define what the steps of our selling process are. Now, right now, this is upside down, but by constantly interviewing customers and at least trying to have a direction, I'd rather have a plan that's weak than to have no plan at all. Even if our plan is we're going to suck less in how we're figuring this out, it's still a plan, and it's still one that we're working to improve. That's the first suggestion, I think, as a manager, is to work on how we put these kind of processes in place and talk about these processes to our salespeople, even if they're experienced pros. A great conversation with your most senior sales reps is to walk them through and just say, how do you see your steps of a sales call are going to change now that we've changed how you're selling? I know it's going to be posted. We're talking with Angelo and Jeff, and they're going to have it up in a couple of days of the last webinar. We had a little bit of technical challenges, and they've fixed that now, and it's going to be posted. But it might be walking your sales reps through that second webinar that we had here for CVSN that goes through some of the skills and just stopping the video and asking them at each of those steps. So what are we going to do about this? How do we apply this? How can this idea help us? And use that video webinar series as a planning session for your sales team. The second suggestion is this is the time you need to be more involved as a selling process coach and leader. I've come up with a rule of thumb I've watched from interviewing several of my customers. And that is whatever time you spent with your sales reps before all this virus impacted, changed our worlds, you need to triple it. So if you were talking to your sales reps once a week, now you need to do it 3 times a week. If you're talking to them once a day, now you need to do it 3 times a day. The idea we need to have more connectivity, we need to have more hands-on with our people to be persuasive and to maintain control, because the chance of losing productivity and losing effectiveness when we've lost the physical control of our people is causing a lot of problems for a lot of individuals. This is also the great time to do one-on-one account planning. What is our specific plan with an individual account? Because one of the things about distribution is usually your top 5 customers as a sales rep make up about 80% of your sales. So if we just do one account plan a month, within 5 or 6 months, you'll have all of the major customers you're selling to covered. This idea that we do things on purpose with a plan. The third suggestion is this is the time for coaching and training. Product knowledge training is still important to be done, but more on selling skills and customer uniqueness and differentiation skills. We need to be improving not just the product and technical knowledge of our people, but some people call it the soft skills, how you sell, how you be persuasive, how we communicate a stronger message. And then the fourth thing is you've got to look for change. I think that a real reality, it was a question asked earlier, if you have really senior salespeople who are not willing to change, I don't know they're going to be able to stay in your organization. I don't think they're going to last. I don't think customers are going to accept that. The reality of the process is when we go through change, there's 4 coaching levels of change and what to look for. You assign stuff to your people. You just don't have to wait and see if there's any results. You have process coaching you can do as a selling process manager. So we tell sales reps we want them talking about a new message. The first thing we look for is there a change in attitude? Are they agreeing with us, saying this is a great idea, or are they going, well, this really sucks. Another thing I got to do for the boss. The second level then, once you see a change in attitude, is you look for a change in effort. If we identified we were going to do more prospecting and get more of our senior managers on video calls with their customers, one of the ways to measure effort is any of that happening? Calls might not even be effective. Are we just still making them in the direction we want them to go? Then the third step is you look for a change in progress. If we actually started new business prospecting effort right now, progress would be that we started having some more proposals generated for these new prospects. And then the fourth and final change is then we can look for results. But results might be 6 months or a year down the road. We don't have to wait that long. We can give instructions and direction to our people and then immediately look for a change in attitude, to a change in effort, to a change in progress, ultimately to a change in results. You can control this process of change and how we guide through it. Angelo, real quick, are there any final questions we have? And then we'll wrap it up in just a couple minutes and we will end this.
I think Jeff was going to, Jeff, I think you've got some questions there, don't you? I guess he's not there. Well,
this is my persuasive impact.
Yeah, here's one here. Share some examples of more tactical and strategic questions to be asking when interviewing salespeople.
Well, I think two ways to answer that. One is it's a combination of both. Think of the coaching zone together as a set. If I'm interviewing, I'm a sales rep interviewing for a job with you, Angelo, and you're the head of sales for my parts company, for your parts company, and you're thinking of adding me as a new sales rep. I have the most power in the interview if I can tell you all the great things I have done in the past, all the successes of sales that I've made, and all the great stuff I'm doing right now. But how many sales reps do you know were successful in spite of their best efforts? Just because it happened to them doesn't mean they controlled it. So one of the ways to ask more tactical and strategic questions is to ask a question that's more tactical, saying, okay, let's assume my company is a prospect for what you used to sell. Walk me through how you'd sell them. What are the steps you'd go through? What would you do next? And then what would you do? Type of questions. We want to see what that multiple step path is and ask them to say, okay, how would you sell me? Say, okay, let's assume if you're talking to me and you're selling, let's say they came from selling cleaning supplies and they look like they have potential and interviewing now to sell for you, a different industry, but you think they have the skills that you want for your sales team, is to ask them to say, okay, let's assume that you were still with your old company and you were going to sell us. Walk me through. How would you communicate? We're very happy with our current sanitary supply, paper towels, toilet paper, cleaning chemicals, for degreasers for our shop. So we're very happy with our current vendor. Why, based on all the options, do we want to consider buying from you? Ask the sales rep to even see if they have a control of an answer and have anything organized that they thought about. The second thing is to say, walk me through tactically how you would sell me. See, it's the future focus of the conversation. Don't let them bring in what they've done in the past, because you don't know how much of that they did on their own versus the team doing it for them to make the sale. We want to hear, do they have control over the process, not just the results of the process that they've had. I think that might help. We're about a minute over.
We're pretty much out of time. I think that we need to wrap this up because people start.
You got it. Let me, in 2 minutes and we will have this over with.
Okay.
First of all, I want to remind everybody to help you in evaluating both yourself and your sales team. This was something we included in the earlier virus, the first webinar, but I just included it again. These are just simple tests of subjective 1 to 5, 5 being high, 1 being low, as a way for you to assess where the balance of skills are for both your salespeople and even for the managers in your company. So you can organize what skill areas do we most need to improve that'll help make them overall more effective. The second thing is, I just want to remind you, there's a lot of free stuff I have on the internet available to help you through this. Since this virus happened in early March, I have been posting 2 to 3 videos a week and have been posting them all to the site in addition to all the social media sites. So if you just want to see it as a review, if you go to pancero.com/virus, you can see all the videos that I've done talking about this new arena and environment of selling. It's a resource to help you. Love to have you connect with me. I've got about 400 videos on YouTube. Connect with me on LinkedIn, where we continue to post videos every week. And if it's even easier, you can sign up for my newsletter. It comes out every Friday, and it just summarizes the videos posted for the week and give you the links to them as a way to help keep track of the videos so that hopefully you can use them with your sales team. This is a changing environment. Everything's upside down right now. But if I can answer any questions or be of any help to you, if you call me, you've got my support. Angelo, it's been an honor to be part of this. Sorry we ran over 2 minutes. I turn it back over to you, and thank you.
Not a problem, Jim. Thank you so much for another great presentation with valuable takeaways for those on the call. I hope if you have a topic by any chance that you'd like covered, we would love to have a webinar on that topic. Just reach out to myself or Jeff Volpe, and we'll get an expert to cover it. Until next time, stay safe and healthy, everyone.